Clay, let's get right into this one. Explain to me what happens in the B plot of Meld, which is the Shay Sandrine sequence in this episode. I watched it. I didn't think anything was happening, and then for some reason, Paris and Chakotay are at each other's throats by the end of it, and I feel like there's going to be another murder after the credits roll or something. I'm not really sure what goes on in that B plot. It's strange.
Paris is got a gambling ring going that he himself is benefiting from. And he's hustling everybody, so Chakotay has to shut it down.
How did I just blank out? How accurate do they have to be to guess the number of like neutrinos in a nebula or something?
I guess apparently they have to be dead on because nobody's winning, and he's reaping all the benefits.
It's those was it Mega Millions or whatever? All the lotteries, I guess, get passed on. If no one wins, it just keeps building, and then you can go crazy. And the media says you got to buy a lottery ticket, and you do. You think you're going to win, and you don't win. Shockingly. That's exactly what happens in Shay Sandrine here with, I guess that woman's name is Ricky. She's a recurring character.
Oh, okay.
A lot of making out with Paris and her. A little bit of Harry Kim.
I had a friend once who was very upset the day after they called Mega Millions. I may have said this before. I can't remember. We've been doing this for a long time. He was very upset because he said, my ticket, I was one number off on every number. I almost won. And I was like, I don't think that's how that works, but
it's pretty remarkable though if it's actually true.
I know, yeah. It's like you should get extra points for that.
Yeah. Keno, if you don't get anything in Keno, I think we talked about, you win in Keno because the odds of not getting a number in Keno is difficult.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. So. I mean, that's the problem with the lottery, right? Because it's either you win or you don't, where I feel like most other gambling things, it's like there's such a wide array of ways to win or lose.
Yeah.
That
well, is it with like, I'm always a little bit confused. There's a way to win a little bit of money in Mega Millions somehow. Like people win like $100,000 and there'll be like 20 of them that do that.
Do you have to get like
because I think
all of the numbers except like the extra ball or something?
Yeah, what they call the Mega Million, like the bonus ball or whatever, which seems to determine whether or not you win. I guess it's if you just get 4 out of 5 of the numbers or something. That's worth X amount of dollars. Yeah. Imagine getting that and not getting the last ball. You'd still be happy, but you'd be like, God damn.
Do you know anyone who's ever won the lottery? Like
how much money?
Scratch. I'm talking like multiple millions of dollars.
No, not multiple millions. My parents won 15,000 once. That's about
no kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
on
cool.
Keno. That's why I know. But I know our friend Sean had an uncle who won the lottery.
Yeah.
Or something. Yeah.
Yes, he won close to $100 million, I think.
Yeah.
And
bought Patriots season tickets with it.
Yeah, I reaped the benefits from that because one summer, his young daughters at the time really wanted to see the Jonas Brothers. And the only way that he could get Jonas Brothers tickets was to buy season tickets to the Tweeter Center or whatever it's called now.
Yeah.
And so he had all these other tickets. Actually, I think we both benefited from that because we went to River Rave that year. Do you remember that?
Did I go to River Rave?
Yeah, because we saw Stone Temple Pilots.
Oh, were they a part of? I was going to bring up Stone Temple Pilots. They were a part of that then, I guess.
Yeah, because we had those box seats at the edge of the first thing.
Yes,
yeah.
That's right. Those box seats were great. You had like a little table. Yeah.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I saw Iron Maiden there. It was unbelievable.
Oh, really? Yeah, Stone Temple Pilots was really good when I went. I caught a cigarette from Scott Weiland.
Nice.
He was throwing cigarettes into the crowd, and I caught one. That's the benefit of sitting in that little box. That's all you're basically sitting in like a little animal pen, but it's only for you and your friends who are in there. So it's nice.
Yes.
All right, this episode of Voyager is called Meld. It's the 16th episode of the second season of Voyager. It came out on February 5th, 1996. It is one of 3 in Suitor's Penance arc. Teleplay goes to Michael Piller. Story credit goes to Michael Sussman. Directed by Cliff Bole. In-universe date is unknown, but it's 2372.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What number in the Neelix tries to get an orgy going arc is this?
One of 153. It's an ongoing serialized plot. In Meld, Tuvok is plagued by the senselessness of a murder aboard Voyager. Yep, so this is Brad Dourif is the guest star, Doc Cochran, the voice of Chucky, the ringworm guy in Lord of the Rings.
Yes, the ringworm guy.
The guy, the dark, the my favorite fantasy trope, which is the guy who's got black hair, dressed all in black, and is pale, but no one seems to think is up to any kind of mischief.
Right? Yeah. His name is literally Worm Tongue, and they're like, this guy seems on the level. His
references were very positive about him and his banking, his prior banking career.
Yeah.
Where did I go here? So yeah, we've got.
I was just gonna say he's great. If you need a psychopath, Brad Dourif is the way to go.
Yep.
He has one famous X-Files episode where he plays a psychopath, and he was also in Exorcist 3.
Okay.
Where he gives a fantastic performance as a psychopath.
What year did that come out? The 90s?
Oh, Exorcist 3. I want to say it might be late 80s, early 90s, like maybe 1990 or something.
Okay.
Good movie. Weird
movie. Besides the voice of Chucky, I always think he's just Doc Cochran to me from Deadwood is the big role that I remember him for.
He's always good. Every time he shows up, he's great.
Yeah, he's very good. He's a good actor. He plays Lon Suter here, who is a Beta Z psychopath that Tuvok goes toe-to-toe with in an episode called Meld. So what'd you think of this one?
This one is really interesting to me because I loved it for the first half of it.
Okay.
And then right around the halfway point, I started getting inklings of what might be going on here, and I had flashbacks to last episode, or the comments from last episode, where the patrons kind of hinted at the unfortunate formula or unfortunate way that some of these episodes were going to go.
Yeah.
In that they have a really good concept for like the first half, and then they kind of nosedive afterwards.
Yep.
And so as soon as Tuvok was having the conversation with Janeway, I started thinking, oh, wait a minute. I think I know where this is going to go. I think this is Tuvok takes on the psychopathy of Suter and goes nuts or something.
Yeah.
Which is not what they did.
Right.
But they didn't go as goofy with it as I kind of expected them to.
Did you think he was going to be running around the ship killing people or something like that?
Yeah, I thought he was going to just like turn into a maniac or something.
Yeah.
They didn't do that. They did let Tim Russ do some acting, which was nice. But ultimately, I feel like there was so many really interesting ideas in this, especially in the first half, up through that discussion with Janeway about whether or not they should execute him. And I just don't think the back half of it lived up to it. Because like the thing that really hooked me was when Tuvok is talking to the doctor about the initial murder and stuff. And after he's gotten the confession from Suter. And the thing that the doctor keys in on is how to close the case without understanding the logic of the crime.
Right.
That's very tough for a Vulcan. And I was like, oh my God, that's such a good idea.
Yeah.
If you have a Vulcan up against someone who's done something completely irrational.
Yeah.
And
the
Vulcan,
psychopath. Yeah.
Yeah. And the Vulcan absolutely needs to try to figure out, like, he's more concerned with the logic of the thing that happened than whether or not the guy did it. Like, that's such a good idea. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
And they never really got into that in a way that I found very satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
And the same with the execution thing, where it's like this idea, the logical thing here is that if you don't execute this guy, then you have a murder on the ship and he's taking resources and stuff. And, you have to have some sort of blah, blah, so you've got Janeway, who's more compassionate to the situation, and Tuvok, who's much more logical and like harsh or cold about it, or emotionless. That's really interesting. But then it turns into he starts going nuts, and I don't know. It wasn't really working for me in the back half.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is a really strong episode of Voyager. It's probably one of the best ones we've seen so far. It's nice when the series does character work instead of anomaly of the week stuff.
Yes.
It's this one feels particularly Deep Space Nine-y to me in some ways.
Right.
It's about like I think it accomplishes a lot, even though I would agree with you, probably not quite to the extent that you're saying, but I do think it falls apart. I wouldn't say it falls apart. It has a weaker second half than it has an opening half.
And I mean, I guess I didn't hate the back half of it. I think like I was so excited by the prospect of the first half that when they went the way they did, I think I had a little bit of that expectation left over. So like I could. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I like when they get into the stuff where when Tuvok starts barking at them through the force field, I really liked that scene. But in my head, I was like, does this really? Where is this really fitting in as far as the other stuff goes? It's a cool scene and it's doing some interesting stuff. So I was kind of like doing that, putting the puzzle together in my head that way, which I think probably made me a little bit less enthusiastic about the back half. But that being said, I agree with you. I do think this is a really strong episode. It's
I think the fact that they focus on character stuff is neat. I think the fact that they go with an aspect of the Vulcan mind meld that we haven't seen yet is a pretty good idea, because this is not what's neat about it is that this is not a made up idea. Like, it's always been a part that the two minds becoming one leads to a mixing of the personalities. On some level. They do it in Sarek. They do it in the TOS films. I'm pretty sure they certainly do it in Sarek and stuff. So it's not like this isn't an example of Voyager making something up like the Warp 10 barrier that they have to break, and you go like, whatever that is. This is an example of something that's existed, and it makes sense based on even what they call a mind meld, and what Tuvok says, it's two minds become one or whatever. I think that it's, as you were saying, like the incentive for Tuvok to do it, he's driven by the fact that he can't understand why someone brutally murdered somebody else. Is really clever. I like the fact that the episode doesn't try to be a mystery for longer than it needs to be.
I really like that scene where Tuvok goes to him and then he's just like, well, no use in denying it anymore. Yes, I did kill him, and I used this thing. I put him in here because I thought people wouldn't find him. The murder weapon is in this place.
Yeah. Even the doctor, like the when the doctor's like, well, I found the weapon. It has his fingerprints and DNA all over it. No one else saw anything. It has to be this guy that did it. They go out of their way to really like make it. You're not going to. We're not going to trick you with this one. This is actually the guy who did it. And
when the doctor first starts talking about finding other DNA in the wound, I thought for sure it was going to be the owl did it.
We get 3 different scenes of someone shoving that guy into that that little plasma conduit over that we ended up in.
Yes. The one where Suter kills him, and the one where he just like slips on a banana peel and hits his head 8 times and falls inside the conduit.
He's like, I better bring Suter back his bloody wrench that he gave me a couple. Oh, Jesus. The worst case scenario for Lon Suter. I like that they don't keep it a mystery. I like that.
Yeah.
To me, I guess that my counter to what you're saying, which is not that I disagree with it, to me this one reminds me of a song. And I was trying to come up with a specific example, but it's one of those things. It's like when you hear a song like this, you recognize it and you're like, I'm going to write this down because it'll come up later. I can't think of a specific song, but it's a kind of song that, like, I feel like there are a lot of great songs that are about something, but you kind of have a hard time identifying it because the song goes off in a lot of different thematic directions about what it's talking about. Like, I feel like REM does this a lot. Like, it's like inscrutable to like really understand what they're talking about in it, but
like American Pie by Don McLean.
Exactly. It's all metaphorical. Or Bad Out of Hell by Meatloaf or something like that.
Yeah, well, man, I don't know what there's not to understand about that song. It's pretty explicit.
So I feel like this episode is kind of about something, but it has a whole bunch of different tangents that come off of it. And they're somewhat distracting, but I think at the same time, they're not so divorced from what the central idea is that they are wrong to include in it. They're just kind of I think the should he be executed subplot is a perfect example of that. It's like, it's not really the point of what's going on, but it's an interesting offshoot argument to have that kind of eventually does thematically tie back into it when it's like when Tuvok is a proto-Vulcan, he's like, let me out of here and I'll fucking kill the guy if no one else is going to do it. So it works. It's just that they do feel if you're really engaged in the first half of it and you're expecting to see some sort of like deep analysis of where psychopathy comes from and how the Vulcan is going to respond to it, it doesn't really stick to that. It moves along into other places, and maybe to its detriment. I think it's tangentially interesting, I guess. So I don't really hold it against it.
Yeah, I don't think I do either after all is said and done, because as I was watching it, I think where my head was when I saw that setup, I was like, oh, this is like Voyager's duet, where it's going to be like a person with an who did a certain thing, having a battle of the minds with the person
Silence
who can't
of the
understand.
Duet, obviously for Star Trek, but very Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah, and I not necessarily in the same way where one of them is explicitly evil or anything, but there's like a core idea of not being able to understand the actions of the other person, that kind of thing.
The Suitor is probably the most evil Star Trek uniformed character, like
but even so, he seems like a pretty cool dude.
Well,
like
after the meld, right?
Yeah, but even before the meld, like he's not going full Dorff with it. He's still pretty laid back when he's talking about killing people, and he's not like hamming it up or anything.
No,
he's which I it's so interesting with him, that specific actor, because I feel like he could have gone either way successfully, and I wonder if they hired him expecting him to go full Dorff.
Yeah.
But he decided not to. But he can be very chilling while also being very quiet.
Yeah, I think he had to be quiet. If he was coming, if he played a big serial killer guy, you'd be like, why haven't we seen this guy for the past 2 seasons? Like, what's he been up to?
What's he been doing on the ship?
He's obviously running holographic murder programs because he knows that won't work. But a little side note, is it the quality of the voodoo rip, or is he wearing black contact lenses?
I couldn't tell. I think he's wearing contact lenses.
Okay.
Because there was one close-up of his eyes where I thought I saw the edge of a lens. And I was wondering that too, because I was like, his eyes are just black.
Yeah, snake like, black eyes. Yeah.
Yeah, like a doll's eyes. And they roll over right before they bite you. But he plays it very understated. He doesn't go too far into mustache twirly villain, but yeah, I guess he is.
We don't know much about him, but yeah, what he does is fairly violent.
Yeah, I guess you could call him. It's just so funny thinking about the fact that this guy has been on the ship for the past 10 months.
Yep.
Because after the murder happens, like all the main Maquis, Chakotay and Torres and Tuvok are like, yeah,
I knew it.
He has a tendency to just like kill indiscriminately.
I'm sorry, Captain. I should have. Yeah, it's funny. It's the scene of Chakotay is just like, I can't believe it.
Yeah.
Suitor talked a lot about killing people when it was fine when he was killing Cardassians, but when he ran out of Cardassians, he just started killing everybody.
Even Tuvok is like, I spent much time with him. I don't remember him ever doing that. And Chakotay is like, yeah, we made sure you didn't see it, Tuvok. But that guy, whoo, he's got some bodies buried, literally.
It retroactively makes it funny to me. There's like an intro scene where they're establishing what's going on, and they talk to a crewman in engineering. He's like, "It was just me and Suitor here last night." And the camera cuts to him like working at a computer terminal, and it's retrospect. It's very funny because he's clearly the insane person in the office, and everyone knows about him. But they treat that moment with a little bit of like levity, almost, where he's just typing away at his computer.
Yeah. But yeah, he plays it really well. I think it's really interesting because his shift after the mind meld is so subtle too.
Yes.
Where he just kind of plays it a little bit more as someone who's been enlightened to a new possibility.
Yeah.
He doesn't go over the top on either side, and I think he's such a good actor.
They do always a favorite of mine, which is that the subtle body swapping stuff, like the posture changes. A very early scene early on is right after the meld when Tuvok is talking to Janeway. Instead of his hands behind his back, he's sort of wringing his fingers while talking to Janeway.
Oh, Sure.
And Suter, when he stands up, does the Tuvok hands behind his back as he's talking to him and stuff like that.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I didn't catch that, but that stuff is always nice.
Yeah, they do good stuff like that. And another thing that I appreciate about it is that they don't have Suter sort of break the meld effect first, which I was kind of worried that they were going to do. Like the magic wears off on him first, and he becomes crazed again as Tuvok is trying to battle through his thing.
Give into it, Tuvok.
Right,
you know you want to.
Yeah, as he's taunting him. No. And
my mind.
he doesn't have a lot to do because he's stuck in the brig for most of it, but it's a good trade-off, and I think Tim Russ does a really good job too. I enjoyed the scene where he's in sickbay behind the force field and he throws the chair at the force field and stuff. I think they did a really great job of effectively showing why Vulcans, before they had this turn in their history, could have been terrifying. You know, it was neat. It's kind of neat to say. Yeah,
it's funny because Tim Russ kind of goes full Hannibal Lecter, more so than Dorff does, but it makes sense because Suter's someone who lives with this every day. And Tuvok clearly doesn't. And so getting exposed to it is obviously going to be more impactful and intense for him.
Yes.
And I think he does a good job in that scene, too, because he is so good as Tuvok. He's one of those actors where, if I saw him in something not as Tuvok, I don't know if I would recognize him until I saw his name in the credits.
Because of how clipped the Tuvok speech pattern is.
Yeah. Yeah, and how still he holds his face all the time.
Yeah.
And so to see him, emoting and almost losing the Tuvok voice a bit, as he was getting more emotional and up there, he started losing the Vulcan intonation kind of started to drop away, and he's like, "I will kill that motherfucker."
Yeah, I actually thought they could have pushed his losing the Vulcan accent a little bit more. Because he
well, you go to college somewhere outside of Vulcan, it kind of goes away naturally.
It does,
after the first couple weeks or so.
We're a global village at this point, so everything fades.
The worst is the people who go to Vulcan for a month, and then they come back and they have the Vulcan accent.
Logic this, logic that. Fuck you, Bob.
It's called a truck. It's not a lorry, you son of a bitch.
Yeah, I think he's good. I think that whole trade-off is effective. I think maybe as a canon thing, the only thing that I'm not super crazy about is that the Vulcans have a special part of their brain that needs to be rebooted to make this happen, which is just one of those things.
That was one of when they plug him into that machine, and I was like, okay, fine, I guess. That's one of the things where I was starting to go, all right, here we go. Because they were getting a little bit too silly with it.
Yeah.
But I think it gets them where they need to go, I guess, and the ends justify the means, I guess, for this.
What's a bigger letdown for me that I thought was a really ripe story beat was that Tuvok at the end, after they've rebooted him, he is talking to Janeway and he apologizes for what he said to her. Mm-hmm. I didn't think what he said was that bad and warranted an apology. I understand why Tuvok would be apologizing, but I felt that what he said to Janeway could have been much more cutting than what he actually says to her.
Sure. I mean, he's still being insubordinate no matter how you cut it.
He is, and I think he's embarrassed as a Vulcan. It would be embarrassing to him. But I thought that there was potential there for either that or maybe play up more of Janeway. It must be somewhat shocking to Janeway to see what is underneath the Vulcan mindset. What they're holding back is kind of a surprising thing, and to see it and to maybe be a little bit more shocked by it or surprised or whatever. But it is Voyager, and they're going to have to reboot it back to the status quo at the end of it. But there's a lot of terror in that I think they hinted at, but didn't quite go all the way as to what makes this whole situation all that more bizarre and scary, basically.
Yeah, and I mean when he just straight up calls her a coward and a hypocrite and stuff, I thought that stuff was really that's the kind of stuff I like out of these shows where they take these characters and they test them and they push against the decisions that they've made and stuff. That's what gets you the best stories out of these shows.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is a really interesting episode because I think you're right. It's got a lot of ideas that are kind of circling around the same core, but they're not totally connected, I think, a way that they could be. Like the other thing that I thought was really interesting that they didn't get into is just regardless of whether or not they get into the Tuvok can't handle not knowing the logic behind the murder thing, just putting a Vulcan and a Betazoid together is really interesting.
Yeah,
because
they don't really. Yeah, sorry. They don't. The Betazoid thing really just only seems to be done to give him a trigger that this is what causes this to happen to them. Yeah,
I feel like it's a bit of a missed opportunity because you've got a Betazoid who feels everything and a Vulcan who feels nothing, and putting those two in conflict is pretty cool. I'm kind of surprised they haven't done it before. Frankly.
Yeah, what's surprising to me about it might be one of the Suitor arc does not immediately continue, just to let you know that. He doesn't come back for a couple episodes.
Sure.
But I do feel that this is a story that they could have taken 3 episodes and done like an Enterprise Season 4 thing where this is the arc for 3 or 4 episodes that we're going to get through, because that way you could sort out all these ideas. I thought that they were making him... Because I think they bring up the fact that he's a Betazoid pretty early. And I was like, oh, they're going to play into the idea that, a lot of serial killers get some sort of emotional kick out of causing terror in their victim, basically. And I thought that as a Betazoid, he was going to be like supercharged by that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And that would be what would trigger Tuvok, because Tuvok also shows interest in that because he does the I'm going to kill Neelix on the holodeck thing, right? So
yeah, I was wondering, is the kill Neelix program must be the second most requested program,
and it's just a line
just behind the sex program, right?
Yes. After killing him, Tuvok goes off and busts a nut over there, but it's just like it's a long line to get into the Tuvok or the kill Neelix. I mean, the writers clearly recognize it too, right? It's like you have Neelix annoy him enough that he gets killed.
I honestly didn't see it coming. I mean, I
didn't either.
But
yeah,
because the first scene with Neelix is also so fucking annoying that when they come back to it, like I knew what was going to happen. I knew it was going to. The thing was, okay, he's going to annoy Tuvok and it's going to set him off and he's going to grab him or something.
Yes.
But when he choked him out and killed him, I was like, oh, I mean, I think I understand this is the holodeck now, but I was not, they got me on that one because he was just legitimately annoying as shit.
And they've had a lot of Tuvok gets annoyed by Neelix in the cafeteria scenes. Mm-hmm. That seems to have happened a bunch of times. So yeah, it's not super unexpected. Yeah. And I think maybe just the final point to really hit about it is that they do bring, it is sort of a death penalty allegory, and they do it pretty well, I think. They make a fairly convincing argument both ways, I think, for executing Suitor. Mm-hmm. I think that Tuvok comes, interestingly, Tuvok comes up with the sort of rationale for doing it, in that like they can't pass him off to another alien thing. That wouldn't be right. He's going to be eating up the rations that people need. He's just going to be stuck in his room. And what kind of punishment is that for the family of that guy who got roasted or whatever?
If you send him to SETI Alpha 5, he's just going to come back and kill you in about 25 years.
Yep. He'll end up, there'll be a star chart mistake or something. He'll just end up back on Earth before everyone else gets there.
They should have put him on the salamander planet. He could have raised those orphan.
Oh, that's true. Yeah,
highly evolved salamander children.
Just send him off in a Warp 10 shuttle. Janeway, I think, has well, what did you think of the whole death penalty discussion? I feel like Janeway doesn't have she's not as fleshed out in her argument, and it seems more that she's relying on basically what she thinks is the right thing to do, which is not a bad argument. It's just that I feel that Tuvok's argument feels like it's a little bit more thought out in terms of the writing of it, and Janeway's really just kind of, like she did in that previous episode where she has the speech at the end, she's kind of just clinging to ideals in a way, it feels to me. Mm-hmm. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, it's the difference between a point of view that is coldly rational and coldly logical versus Janeway's position, which is clearly much more empathetic.
Yeah.
And I mean, what is that more so than just ideals and an emotional I think she could have gone deeper into the ideals if she wanted to do that and talk about how, I mean, that's not how the Federation does things.
Yeah.
But I mean, even there.
Well, I feel that the strength, sorry to interrupt, but Tuvok's argument is effective because it seems like it's actually attached to this situation, right? Janeway is not really making an argument for Suitor. She's making an argument vaguely against Tuvok's ideas. Does that make sense? So like Tuvok's thing about like, what are you going to tell the sisters of this guy when we get back is a much better emotional argument to me than Janeway just going like, we don't do that, mister. That's not our thing that we do.
Yeah. I mean, it is situationally unique, right? Because it's not exactly like in real life, the difference between being put to death and life in prison is not you get to spend 75 years chilling out on a starship.
Yeah. Eating rations.
Basically. Living a comfy life. So I think it is very different. It is different to the how specific the situation is, but also like at the same time though, I am fine with maybe this being the first time Janeway's ever thought about this.
Yeah.
So maybe where Tuvok is being more specific to the moment, she kind of hasn't had the time to really work that out yet.
Right. She's a little caught off guard by the situation.
Yeah. So her reaction being a little bit more based in ideals and emotion, I think it makes sense.
Yes.
Because she clearly wasn't counting on one of her crew members to be a psychopath.
Yeah, and I think that maybe the weakness of it narrative-wise is that once it gets to the end and Tuvok is locked in the sickbay and he's like, let me out now, kill him, the story to that point has not really given Janeway anything to further develop her idea by that point. So like Janeway doesn't have an effective argument back at him by the end of it. It's just kind of we don't do this because you have to rely more on seeing that Tuvok is now basically a crazed animal psychopath person to understand that what he's talking about is the wrong thing to do, I guess.
Yeah.
It's tough for me. I always, I feel like the death penalty is one of those things that I just don't know where I personally end up on. So it's like, it's hard to judge the characters about it because and interestingly, it's almost backwards. Like the rational point of view for me would be the Tuvok side of things, which is to say that it's probably based on how wrong the death penalty is a lot of the time, and do you really want to give the state the power to kill people?
Right.
That seems more like the philosophical thing. But the emotional aspect is if one of my kids was killed by somebody, I wouldn't want that person to be alive because it wouldn't give me them being alive would not let me have a peace of mind, I don't think, in some way.
Yeah.
So it's hard. And I feel like the characters are interestingly swapped here, where Tuvok makes the emotional argument and Janeway has to make the philosophical one.
Yeah, I mean, it's the tough thing about it is it's one of those things where most of the people who are coming up with opinions about it are not people who have any like experience with
emotional connection to it.
And I mean and which becomes an interesting debate because even the ones that do vary greatly person to person how they feel about it. Like there are people who have family members or who have been murdered who don't want the death penalty because they think that life in prison is worse. It's like it is what I'm getting to is that there's I don't think it's a situational. I don't think it's something that you can really come down with a right or wrong answer because it is so. There's so many ways to interpret things, know, and it can be looked at rationally, but if you look at it rationally, you can be ignoring the real emotions baked into it, but is that the right way to go? So it's a really difficult a really difficult thing to wrangle.
Yeah, and I think that what the episode benefits from is that it doesn't overwhelm the story, because I think that if it was the focus of the story, it would not be a good episode. Because
I agree. Yeah. I think it would be too. It would be. Yeah, it would be too preachy, and I'm sure it would be just too on the nose. And I'm sure the ultimate method by which they chose to tell that story might not be as considered and appropriate as they think it might be.
Sure, yeah.
So to kind of have it as a subset of this story, I think actually works pretty well.
Yes, I think it's much better. Anything else to say about Meld before we go to patron comments? Suter comes back in the season finale in the first episode of the third season is when he returns.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's it. Then we'll go to patron thoughts. Thanks everybody for listening today. Thank you for supporting the show. If you want to support the show, patreon.com/the Pensky File. You get extra stuff. You give a couple bucks, you get extra podcasts, you get a whole bunch of stuff, and you get the ability to leave comments on upcoming episodes, and we read them. The first one here is, that is not the first one. First one, it's a poem, so I'll send it to you because I am not good at reading poetry for some reason. Okay, where's your little blurb thing? There it is. This is Clef, and here's your first one.
Brad Dourif guest stars in this thriller when Tuvok tries to rehab a killer. Except for the breaks at Sandrine's, they're all brilliant scenes. Bottle episode, but definitely not filler. 5 satisfying rewinds to see Neelix die out of 5.
You do see the life drain from his eyes. Andrew Sherlock says, Meld, we don't see mind melds go bad nearly as often enough in the TNG era, and this one goes really bad. Solid episode with Tim Russ and Brad Dourif, Chucky, swapping character perfectly. 4 broken psyches out of 5.
I actually did really like when the doctor was talking about mind melds, and he's like, this shit goes wrong a lot more than the Vulcans admit. Because that feels like something that feels oddly real.
Yeah.
You know, where it's like, of course the Vulcans aren't. Everybody knows about the Vulcan mind meld. It's like a cultural thing, basically. They're not going to admit that it lobotomizes people.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because remember Enterprise, where Enterprise. It's such a good example of where Enterprise went wrong. Like after this interesting example of a mind meld, they just were like, the mind meld gives you AIDS, basically, and it's like this is a much dumber version than what Voyager did and everything else did before it, but it's along those lines.
Yeah, I mean the little bit of dialogue that Brad Dourif gets, where he talks about the mind meld being really a violent act, is so much more interesting than mind melds give you AIDS.
Yeah, it is. It's meta. It's one of those like the transporter kills you conversations that they had in that TNG episode about the transporter. It's like everyone's thinking it, but no one really brings it up.
Yeah. The one other thing I did want to mention is I thought it was interesting where the Doctor's point of view on this stuff was.
It's a good Doctor episode.
Yeah, because what the hell does he say? The Doctor basically comes down on the side of humans or betazoids or whoever have uncontrollable anger that leads them to do this stuff. And it's, I think most civilized people would push back against that, but it's interesting for the Doctor, who is this programmed medical entity, to come down on the side of, no, there's just a part inside your brain that makes you want to kill sometimes. It's just a matter of whether or not you can control it.
Yeah, I actually thought they stumbled over themselves there a little bit, because we're in the Star Trek universe, and at the current point, it is somewhat in like our timeline right now in the 2022 or whatever. It is difficult to identify causes of that kind of violence, but in this episode alone, they scan his DNA and say he's not psychotic. You know, they understand that there is a cause for whatever psychopathy comes from people, or where the violence would come from. So it's not as confusing as the Doctor makes it seem in the universe of Star Trek Voyager. Unfortunately, I was wondering how they were going to get around that, because it's the same as the that weird episode where the doctor refused to give that like pregnant woman some nausea medication because he's like, tough it out, bitch. Do you remember that one?
Yes. Yeah.
It's kind of the same argument here. It's the same, like he knows the answer and the answer is very easy to get to. So it's surprising he doesn't. I was just going to say, it was also kind of a bit of a time capsule to see the how the understanding of DNA worked. Yep.
At this point, where it's like it's in the future, but they're still like DNA is absolutely irrefutable, and also you can tell if you're a psychopath by your DNA. It's like I don't think that's how that works.
It might be.
I'm pretty sure it's specifically a brain thing.
They've narrowed it down a little bit. Maybe there might be some genetic disposition to it. I don't know. I don't know how far Voyager medicine has come.
One bead on the double helix just keeps smashing into one of the other beads. It's like the psychopath bead.
The little molecules of DNA are doing their own little mind meld every time they replicate. They just find each other and hold heads. There you go. This is Eric McGowan, the one that I just sent to you.
Meld. We're in the back half of season 2, which is a lot stronger than some of the earlier episodes this season. Meld is a great Tuvok episode, and Brad Dourif is an excellent guest star. I'm sure Wes and Clay will get a kick out of the Neelix death scene. This one's a strong 4 out of 5 for me.
Kyle Barrett says, Meld, finally the bad run of episodes ends and a great run begins because this is probably the best episode of Voyager yet. Other than an awkward 90s conflation of bipolar disorder with murderous insanity and a distracting B-plot.
That too, yeah.
There's such a clear focus, intent, and tone to this episode that it brings to mind Deep Space Nine, although maybe that's just the lighting. You can't really have the story be a whodunit when the brilliant Brad Dourif is the guest star, so the episode cleverly evolves at a satisfying pace and becomes a fascinating and unsettling Tuvok character study of both the investigator in need of answers and the Vulcan losing his grasp on his emotions, portrayed flawlessly by Russ. And I'd argue that being an outlet for murderous rage is the best use of the holodeck ever in Star Trek. Yes, Wes, even better than Schisms. A very high 4 out of 5.
Yeah, I wonder. So let's go back into TNG for a second in the episode where they discover that Barclay is creating fantasy worlds where he may or may not be having sex with holograms people. Of his crewmates.
Yeah, may or may not, Clay.
What would be worse? Would it be worse to find that, or would it be worse to walk in on Barclay and he's like, oh, this is the program where I get to kill everyone?
I think it would be worse. Well, so I think it would be worse to walk in on someone who is killing me, but is not a psychopath and is doing it more because they think it's funny. Does that make sense? So, like,
I thought you were going to combine the two and say walk in on someone who's killing you, but is also sexually aroused during it.
No, like if it was a psychopath doing it, I would be alarmed, but I'd be like, okay, he's just crazy. But if it was, like, say if I walked in on you killing me, I'd be like, well, Clay's not crazy. So there's something even more upsetting about this than the fact that it's a psychopath doing it. If I walked in on someone having sex with me, I always kind of thought that the TNG people took a little bit of a hoity-toity attitude with Barclay. Like, it's wrong what he's doing, but it's not like you don't drag him out in front of the captain and explain that he's doing this to everybody.
Yeah, you know? It's such a weird concept because, like, it gets into all sorts of ideas of
identity, basically.
Yeah, identity and violating bodily autonomy, even though you're not technically doing it for real. And, I mean, with either one of these, whether it's having sex with or murdering, I guess. Like, yes. I'm sure there's a reading where having sex with a holographic version of someone without their okay is a form of sexual assault and possibly rape. Yeah. I don't know. It's a weird thing to consider, and we better start working it out because that shit's coming sooner than you think it will be.
No, and I like
much like Barclay.
They bring it up in this one that Dourif says that killing holograms doesn't do it for him. Like he tried to do that to get around. Because I'm pretty sure in real life there's like a consistent movement to at least understand if you can for people who are pedophiles, basically, if you can create content that does not actually harm children to satiate their urges, like basically like machine learned AI stuff to develop this for them, which is not far from what the holodeck is. that's a better outcome, right? Like if a serial killer is killing holographic characters, it's definitely a better thing than killing real people, even if it is weird.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, it is, but like, how long does that work until they have to?
Yeah.
You know, because I mean, the whole thing with serial killers is escalation is a big part of it. Like a lot of the guys who have intricate methodology in the way that they kill people, it's not something that they do right the first time. You know, it's something that they build to.
They would have to
the
know
other stuff.
Yeah, they'd have to know it's not. You'd have to be a Matrix situation, right? Like you put them in there and they don't know that it's not real, because I'm sure that would impact everything.
I mean, I guess if you wanted it to be a component of being locked up, but at that point, why even bother?
Yeah, right. Just to make them happy. That's like giving Lon Suter his quarters or something.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. Interesting thing to think about.
Did I
living in the future as we do?
Yes. Well, that stuff is coming a long way very quickly. This is Kensito.
Meld, how many times has Brad Dourif played this kind of character? Doesn't he get bored? I certainly wasn't during this episode, but I give the credit for that to Tim Russ's great performance as an unbalanced Tuvok. 4 out of 5.
Taxel Bear says, Meld, a good episode because it's one where the antagonist is on the ship, meaning that Voyager can't just sail away from the problem. Which is a very good point, and that is what we talked about that in the previous episode.
Yeah, and it is I feel like it's fairly underused in the show so far because, excuse me, like there's so many interesting things you could do in this situation that Voyager is in on the ship.
Yeah.
That it surprises me that they go right back to, all right, we need the Klingons to show up and, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, just be chased by Kazon, basically. No, it all should have been internal. It should have been the ship just falling apart for various reasons. Yeah. This is Patrick Sebo with A Murder on Board.
A murder on board. I'm mired in shock. Tuvok gives chase with Paris cock-blocked. A bipolar maniac. It doesn't take a brainiac to realize this hard-scrabble cunt is Doc Cock. What? 5 of 5 best Star Trek bottle episodes across the series.
Poindexter G says, Meld, anytime that Voyager can build on things that work uniquely within the show's premise, like what would we do with a violent criminal crewman, almost always makes for a great episode. Spock losing his shit was always a popular story on TOS, and there's no reason it can't work for Tuvok. Violent, angry Tuvok is a great way for Tim Russ to stretch his legs, but I find post-Mind Meld Suitor to be equally interesting. He understands exactly who he is, and he doesn't make any excuses, but he also recognizes exactly what is happening to Tuvok, and even tries to help him in his own way. The whole episode is really quite great, even the weird Paris starting a betting pool and being a dick to Chakotay storyline. Disagree with that, but the rest of it I agree with.
It was a very odd choice for a subplot.
I just don't get the point of it. What happened in that?
I don't think it has a point as much as it's just like a non sequitur about the time Tom Paris got a betting pool going. It doesn't add anything.
It ends so weirdly. They're basically, Paris and Chakotay are basically enemies at the end of it, right? And Harry Kim's final line is like, thanks for dragging me into this. And then it just ends, and that's the end of it. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah. Also, I just got what the last line of the one that I read was, because it's Doc Cock apostrophe, which I assume is a shortening of Cochrane.
Cochrane, yes. There you go. They got you. That makes sense. This is Changeling.
Now, that is what I call showmanship, Lieutenant Tuvok. This episode didn't have anything really thought-provoking, but was just a vehicle for 2 really good performances. Dourif really had me guessing of his motivations with his interactions with Tuvok. Did he really want to change his murderous ways? Is he trying to push Tuvok to kill for some sadistic pleasure? Or did he just not care? Russ is good as always, and what a trooper for letting Ethan Phillips put his dirty finger in his mouth. 3 naked, greasy Vulcan rituals out of 5.
I also, I would stress that the Suitor thing did have me guessing as well as to what he was actually doing with Tuvok at the end. And I'm glad they went the way that they did. Aaron Million says, Mel, Tim Russ really gets something to work with here, a deep exploration of his character. Up to this point, the franchise more or less skirted around the possible negative effects of a Vulcan mind meld, but here they are front and center. What really makes this episode work is that you want to know how both characters, not just Tuvok, are affected. 4 murderous mind melds out of 5.
I was also surprised Tuvok opts for the 2-handed mind meld. Usually it's just the one.
Oh, just the one? Right? Yeah.
Or maybe that's just how the lazy way Nimoy used to do it at the end.
Yeah,
I don't know. I always thought it was just the one hand.
End of his career thing. I'm not sure. What would Sarek do? I guess it usually is kind of a 1. This is Groppler John Zorn with Meld.
We've been told that Vulcans repress their emotions, but this is the first time an actor gets his junk all wet dipping into that particular well. Russ's interpretation is scary AF. It's a pity that Voyager as a series has no idea how to run with the good stuff it does. The result is a piece of acting and development that deserves to find its way into the Vulcan DNA, but instead gets lost in the backwater eddies of a middling to poor season. A lot of good water imagery in this comic.
Yeah.
As good as Russ is, Dorif is better. Where Tuvok's character development gets whisked away before the next episode, Suter is permanently changed by the meld, setting up his arc as one of the best and most interesting in the series. It's certainly more coherent than almost all of the main cast members get for their trouble. 4 black-eyed worm tongues out of 5.
Oh, maybe. So it might just be contacts with the black eye thing there. It was a good choice. He looks scary.
Yeah.
Jaron Hatch says, Meld, this is the last comment. The last episode was so bad that I didn't even leave a comment, but this one definitely deserves a shout out. That shout out goes to Tim Russ and his performance, which is saying something since he's often sharing the screen with the legendary Brad Dourif. Tuvok often gets written off as just another Spock, but this episode firmly establishes him as his own character, a full Vulcan that really struggles with their anger and violent thoughts. If this episode does anything, it proves that Tim and Tuvok are undoubtedly the unsung heroes of this Trek series. 4 dead Neelixes out of 5. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, he's really great. He's probably the 3rd best Vulcan. I think we've probably talked about that before.
Yes,
but
after Spock and Sarek.
Yeah.
The only 2. Yeah. No, I was going to ask you. I mean, at this point, it's really between him and the Doctor on this show, I think. And I don't feel that the Doctor has gotten as much work as Tuvok has. The Doctor feels like he has hints of interesting things going on, but it kind of gets washed away by like a joke or something. Like he'll make a joke and that's the end of it. I think Russ and Tuvok are my favorite character from the show so far. And even if he is just a version of Spock and Sarek, that's kind of what I envision the Vulcans as. Like all the Vulcans should kind of be that way.
Right, yeah.
So he does a good job with it. And, he does stuff like this episode, which gives him enough individuality from those 2, I think, in a way that he becomes his own character.
Yeah, it's funny because you'd think, I mean, obviously this is boring for an actor. I'm sure we've talked about this before. But you would think based on the concept of the Vulcan and the Vulcan sensibility, there should be a sameness to them.
Yeah.
But...
Yep. Yeah, I mean, you can... Yeah. I think there's room with... It's similar to the Data role, right? Like playing Data is hard, but you have a lot to work with within playing Data that way.
Right.
The Vulcan stuff is just like you can't give a prominent Vulcan role to like a B- actor, unfortunately.
Right, yeah.
It's tough. It's a really hard race to play correctly, I think.
Yeah. It reminds me of, do you remember / have you ever seen the movie Equilibrium?
Yeah, with the Christian Bale.
Yeah, I guarantee we've probably talked about this before in this exact same context, but we've been doing this for 8 years. But it's so interesting watching that movie because the concept is that everybody takes these drugs that repress their emotions, and the actors have to make a choice as how to portray that. Mm-hmm. And the 2 most prominent actors in the movie are Christian Bale and Taye Diggs. And Christian Bale, I don't want to say Taye Diggs is a worse actor than Christian Bale, but I think I can say that. because I think Taye Diggs is taking a lot more liberties with what that might mean as opposed to Christian Bale, who clearly has like internalized it a bit more and kind of understands it. But I think it's the same with Vulcans. I think there's some who are like, well, I mean, what does no emotion really mean? You know, you can't just be blank because that's boring. It's like, well, yeah, you don't do that, but you figure out a way to act it that is not boring.
Yes. Like I would
like I'd never call Sarek or Leonard Nimoy boring in what they do.
And I like it's also it's a thing about understanding like the moments that shine through for me are doesn't really not this episode is not a great example, but like when Neelix is annoying Tuvok, that's a perfect performance from Russ, basically, because the Vulcans do get annoyed by that. Like he is annoyed by the character. He has a emotion to it, but he is being stoic's the wrong word, but he's being unperturbed by it as best that he can. That's his choice to do that, and I think that's an effective way to show. Like, if you were to show someone that they have to play a Vulcan, that's the kind of acting that they have to get from it. Yeah,
like when you tease an Amish person, they can't punch you.
That's right.
So you just keep putting ice cream on their head like Homer Simpson.
Keep kicking their horse. That's it for the comments. Thanks, everybody, for leaving your thoughts. Patreon.com/The Pensky File if you want to leave thoughts. Clay, this is Meld. What are we going to give it on our scale of 1 to 5?
I'll stop the world and
meld with you.
I'm going to go 4 on this.
Yeah. It's a high 4 for me.
Yeah, good stuff.
Yep. I think it's, just to repeat myself, I think it's probably one of the top 1 or 2 episodes we've seen so far. The show doesn't always have to go to the space-time anomaly. It can just kind of sit with the characters and do a very effective job of explaining what they are. The weirdness of it is what you were saying, in my opinion. It's just kind of a like relative loss of focus towards the end.
Yeah.
Not even in a bad way, but it's not exactly the tightest script towards the second half or the last third or whatever.
And I mean, let's just be honest. We're not giving this show a 5 until we see Seska give birth. Like, I'm talking full crowning on network television.
And well, it leads to a fist fight between Chakotay and Maj Kala just in the delivery room. That's all I want. We'll give it 4s then. Good episode. Good Voyager episode. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you for supporting the show. Patreon, again, patreon.com/The Pensky File. Clay, do you have anything you want to say?
This has nothing to do with anything.
Yeah.
But I just came across this today. I was reading an article about how they are re-releasing Bram Stoker's Dracula in the theater in 4K for its 30th anniversary, which is wild to me that the movie is 30 years old.
Yep.
And I got very excited, and then I saw, it's only in the UK. Then hopefully it comes here. Not the point. At the bottom of the link of the article was a link to another article on the same site talking about this movie called The Invitation. And it's not The Invitation, not the movie that we covered on Rotten Horror Picture Show. This is a different, a new movie just came out this month called The Invitation. I think I might have seen the trailer. I can't remember. It's like a girl goes to this creepy house and things get weird and blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
And so I'm looking at the link, and it says alternate ending where Dracula ends up on the Demeter. And I'm like, what?
Wait a minute.
And I clicked for this movie, The Invitation.
Okay.
Apparently, I apologize for spoiling this, but apparently The Invitation is a secret Dracula movie.
The new Invitation movie that's not the Netflix one. Okay.
Not the Netflix one. The one that just came out. It's in theaters right now. It's apparently a secret Dracula movie. And this girl goes, she finds her, she does like an ancestry thing. She finds out that she's related to something and blah, blah, blah. She ends up going to Europe, and she ends up going to this lavish house that her family used to own, and she meets this family friend. And like the whole thing is her being kind of guided into the role of becoming the bride of this family friend. And apparently the family friend is Dracula.
Huh. That's interesting.
Yeah. And it didn't get great reviews, but now I want to watch it.
Yes.
Because I had no idea it was a Dracula movie.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because if you didn't know that twist, how long into a movie would you have to realize before you realized what was going on?
Right.
You know?
Like, I feel like you're kind of in From Dusk Till Dawn territory there.
Yeah.
where it's like the first half of this movie better be really engaging in order for you to stick around long enough to find out that it's about Dracula. Usually you lead with that, but I'm actually really interested to see it now because I love it when movies try to do stuff like this, but I don't think this movie has been particularly successful or well reviewed.
Yeah.
So I think
no one got to the twist.
Yeah, I guess nobody got to the twist. And I was watching the trailer going like, okay, so they do have some vampire stuff. Like they hint at some vampire stuff and like give you quick shots of some vampire stuff, but it's not really super explicit.
Yeah.
It's definitely not explicitly Dracula. And I'm wondering if in retrospect, maybe that was not the right choice. But I don't know. It's tough because you want that to be like a fun twist.
Yeah.
But
it's tough knowing it now to watch it, you know?
Yeah.
It's a tough spot to be in to make a movie that way. But interesting. And the invitation just came out.
Yeah, I feel weird because like I would love to not know that going into it.
Right.
But I wasn't going to watch the movie before.
Yeah, it's a bad catch-22 for a filmmaker.
Yeah.
Huh. Well, check out The Invitation, people. I mean, or if you accidentally watched it for some reason, let us know if you realized it was Dracula in the background there. Thanks, everybody, for listening.
All that being said, October on the second string of Stephen King on Patreon, we'll be covering Pet Sematary, so stick around for that.
There we go. Thanks, everybody. See you next time with, is it Dreadnought is the next one? Let me see here. I can click the little button and see. It is. It's Dreadnought. So we'll be back with the Dreadnought episode next week. Until then, see you later.